What makes someone speed, even when they know it's dangerous? Is it thrill-seeking, habit, or something deeper in our psychology? Dr. Chae Rose thinks the answer lies in how our morals, emotions, and situations collide behind the wheel. Professionally Psyched is the podcast that brings you cutting-edge psychology research and real-world insights from our psych community of clinicians, researchers, and educators alike. We're here to explore how psychology shapes our everyday lives and impacts the world around us. Hi everyone, and welcome to Professionally Psyched. I'm Dr. Alison Sheaves, lecturer in the Psychology Department at James Cook University. And before we get started, we would like to acknowledge the custodians of the land in which we record. And for me today, that's the Bindal and Woolgoorookabar peoples. And I pay my respects to elders past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and cultures from wherever you may be tuning in from across the country. We are back with another episode of Professionally Psyched. Today, we join our host, Dr. Dan Miller, lecturer in the Department of Psychology at James Cook University, as he sits down with Dr. Chae Rose, one of JCU's newest lecturers, whose path to psychology has been anything but ordinary. From serving in the Royal Australian Navy to working in construction, Chae's journey into academia was shaped by curiosity, resilience, and a drive to understand why people break the rules, even when they know the risks. In this episode, Dan and Chae dive into the psychology of illegal driving behaviours like speeding and phone use behind the wheel, unpacking why these everyday, rule-breaking moments are far more complex than they seem. So buckle up as we explore what our driving habits can tell us about decision-making, morality, and the psychology of life in motion. Enjoy.
Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Dan Miller. I am a lecturer in the Department of Psychology at James Cook University, and today I am talking with Dr. Chae Rose. How are you, Chae?
Good, thanks, Dan. Nice to be here. Looking forward to doing the podcast.
Yeah, you're relatively new to JCU?
Yeah, that's right. So I only started the JCU here as a lecturer back in May, so quite new, only 4 or 5 months in now, but enjoying every part of it.
Is this your first gig in academia?
No, so I've worked as a researcher and also a sessional academic at the Queensland University of Technology, and then I've worked as a lecturer at the University of Southern Queensland before coming here to JCU.
Cool. And do you want to tell everyone what your kind of broad area of research is?
Yeah, so my broad area of research is I originally started off in road safety. So I did my PhD at the Centre for Accident Research and Road Safety, Queensland, and that was at the Queensland University of Technology. And through that, because my focus was on illegal driving behaviours, I've really gone down that criminological path and looking at illegal driving behaviours, but also more broadly, and how we act and how we offend and our decision-making processes as to what might lead a person to offend or not offend.
And when you say illegal driving behaviors, you mean like speeding?
Yeah, so we call it, crucially, the big five, really. So we have, speeding, drink driving, drug driving, illegal phone use while driving, and also fatigue driving as well. We've done a little bit in that space. But my main research area has been speeding, and mainly speeding because of all those behaviors, excluding probably phone use, speeding, I think, is something that we're all a little bit guilty of, either intentionally or unintentionally. So I find it a really interesting behavior to examine through, different criminological theories of, why did we do that?
Yeah, speeding's a weird one because you can, like, using your phone or not, that's kind of like a, a dichotomous variable, right? You're either doing it or you're not. Speeding is kind of like degrees, right?
Yeah, so speeding can happen anywhere on your journey from A to B. And on that journey from A to B, you can speed intentionally, unintentionally, at any point. So it's super interesting. And of all those behaviors, speeding actually accounts for the most deaths and injuries in Australia. And that's also if we go outside of road safety, if we include other crimes such as, assaults and murder and other things that will cause harm, speeding still outnumbers everything. And yet we see it as quite a, I guess, like not all that criminal or quite a low offense, even though
Yes.
if we took it more seriously and accounted for the amount of deaths and injuries it causes, it should be right up there at the top of the list if we take a cost to society sort of view.
Yeah, it's like the most socially acceptable crime. It must be, surely.
Yeah, it is 100% socially acceptable. Yeah, and we always hear discussions about are the speed limits are correct, and we see that sort of falling off with people going, well, no, I don't believe the speed limit should be 60 on here or 100 along here. But they're set for a reason, and those reasons are to keep everybody safe. But like you said, and like we've all seen within the speeding literature, it's not a clear-cut case, right? So
Yeah. All right. Well, we might come back to that because you've had a bit of an interesting career path. You didn't start out in psychology, is that right?
no, that's right. So I actually, fresh out of high school, I joined the Royal Australian Navy, where I was there for 5 years and sailed the seven seas and had all that fun. But in the Navy, you definitely your job is to be at sea, and I got a bit sick of being away from home, always
Mm.
at sea. So I left the Navy after 5 years and tried to find the right transition. I didn't know what to do. And I ended up in construction, which I loved, and worked as a bricklayer for a few years until my wife convinced me, maybe you should go to university and have a bit more longevity because bricklaying's quite hard on your body. So
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
okay, maybe I'll have a think. And I was always interested in psychology. I think being cooped up on a ship for so many months makes you a bit more interested in the human condition. So signed up to psychology with the actual initial goal of becoming a clinical psychologist. I think like most of us, or like definitely like most students we speak to, but along the way, I was introduced to all the theories that psychology has to offer, especially in social psych, personality, and also the research methods, design, statistics. And I just fell in love with that line of thinking, and I sort of shifted my whole view to go, oh, psychology has a lot more to offer than perhaps just the therapy, which is the most front-facing view of psychology I think most people have in their heads.
Yeah. And when do you think that sort of shift in your mind started to happen? Was it during undergraduate? Was it when you did your honors research?
It was actually during my undergraduate. I did in the first year. You have the research methods and stats. Your first introductory one,
Hmm.
and I hated math at high school. Um, but then I think I saw how it could be applied, and I was like, oh wow, this is actually really cool. And then at the same time, I was taking that stats subject. I was doing social psychology, and we were learning about all the theories of social psychology, but also incorporating how that research design informed those studies and what we learned from those studies moving forward, especially the classics, like Milgram's obedience studies and Asher's conformity, and also the Stanford prison experiment. And they just, blew my mind. I thought they were really interesting and to see where it's come to now. So I love to sort of continue on that fashion.
I had exactly the same experience. I think a lot of people who go into social psych had that experience of learning about the Milgram studies and being like, wow, you can really demonstrate something that's like counterintuitive with research. It's so cool. Yeah. All right. So you do your honors year and then do you go straight into your PhD?
No. So I did my 3 years and said, I've had enough. I don't want to study anymore.
Yep.
Bit burnt out. So I left and I worked as a crisis caseworker in homelessness,
Okay.
which was, a great experience and working in that industry. And I set up a veterans homelessness center there at the Salvation Army in Brisbane in collaboration with the RSL.
Oh, cool.
And then I just sort of felt pulled to come back. I was missing that research, that design, and so I went and completed my honours part time. But while I was doing my honours, I actually got a research officer position at CASQ, so that same centre I did my PhD at. So I was fortunate that I was doing hands on research at the centre as a research officer while doing my honours. So that also drove my honours topic. So I just was able to pick my own honours topic and do my honours topic that I saw fit. And I don't know, just went heavy down that path, I guess, in the road safety lens. And I was drawn to CASQ initially because I think, unfortunately, so many of us have lost friends and family to, these dangerous driving behaviours or just being on the road because it is such a, unfortunately, dangerous behaviour that I wanted to, do something about it. I wanted to contribute to that field of research and contribute to reducing those deaths and injuries, if possible, through research.
That's cool. Yeah. So was your PhD an extension of your honors research?
No, I've chopped and changed so much, Dan. So no, my honours research was on I did drink driving and meta analysis on
Oh yeah.
drink driving and deterrence and
Yep.
preferences of it. And it's like you mentioned before, certain behaviors are yes or no. And drink driving is one of those behaviors that yes, you do it or no, you don't do it. It doesn't really vary
Yep.
from A to B. And then I got thinking, well, speeding is actually quite a dangerous behavior, and it's quite interesting analytically. Like, how do you look at that? How do you examine it? How do you understand that sort of
Hmm.
behavior? And there's a whole bunch of theories about why we do that. And one of the leading theories for preventing speeding is a criminological theory called deterrence theory. And that's the whole premise behind speed cameras, right? We put speed
Yep.
cameras out there because it's going to make you less likely to speed. But, that's just not the case because people obviously still speeding. And in fact, we see it increase. So the road toll, I hate that word as well, the road toll, sort of like a cost of doing business. But the deaths and accidents
Yeah.
for
Right.
crashes
Yep.
this year have actually increased. So clearly, speed cameras aren't exactly doing the job that we intended them to do. So I set out to go, well, what's another theory that could explain why some people speed and why do some people speed despite there being active enforcement against them, police patrol, speed cameras. And there's this cool theory I found called situational action theory, and it was developed at the University of Cambridge. And I thought, oh, I'll reach out to these guys and see if they're interested in doing a speeding topic. And sure enough, they were for the same reasons as we said. It's a continuous behavior. So historically, situational action theory or SAT had only been applied to like violent crime, crimes outside of road safety. And so they're like, yep, that sounds good. So I was lucky enough to uh, be supervised by the team that created SAT at the University of Cambridge in collaboration with QUT. And that's what my research now sort of tries to further. So how can we apply SAT not only to speeding, which was my PhD research, but more broadly, and what are the new adaptations that we can push that theory further.
So what's the basic like I guess your little encapsulation of SAT?
So SATs, it's got varying models, social model and situational model, and the developmental ecological action model. The model that everybody focuses on is the situational model. That's been the most researched to date because the situational model aims to, I guess, draw out what are those real proximal factors that we should be acting on from policy to prevent crime from occurring. And for SAT, what sort of gets drawn out is your moral rules, like your personal moral rules about a behavior. I think that's right or wrong to do,
Hmm.
as well as your emotions, the guilt and shame for having done a behavior. But they also look at the environment or the setting, and they look at the moral context of that setting. So if we think about an example of speeding, what if I'm a person who likes speeding, I want to speed, and then everybody on the road around me is also speeding? The outcome is unlikely to speed, especially if there's no speed cameras or anything around. And then you can vary those sort of contexts. Maybe I don't like speeding, but everybody else is speeding around me. Perhaps I have a group of friends in the car telling me to go faster. So SAT is all about uh, diving into that interaction. So when we look at that interaction, how can we divvy that up and understand why some people are more or less resistant to certain things like speed cameras or are more likely to speed while driving or not speed. So it's that real decision making in the moment, which in turn makes it an incredibly challenging theory to test, which is what excites me about it. Because what we're trying to get at is not trait based or anything like that.
Yep.
It's more what's happening in that exact situation that creates that outcome. And that's not easy to model because I can't get out there and just make some people speed
Yes.
or not, right? So, but I think there's new technological developments such as driving simulators and virtual reality that we can start to tap into that, start to approximate those sort of behaviors a bit more in depth.
Yeah, that's cool. So it's very reminiscent of like Walter Mischel, the person situation debates within social psychology, like to what degree is a behavior driven by dispositional factors versus the external factors, and it sounds like this very looks at the interaction between them, right? Like
Yeah, yeah. And that's been the case, I think, very much, at least from in the criminological literature. When we look at why people offend, it's always been done in isolation. So typically, research will just focus on the person, ignoring all the context, or they'll focus on
yes.
the setting and ignore the person. Rarely does theory, at least effectively, integrate both within one. And because it's hard to do. And I think only recently do we have You know, I think we're lucky being researchers in our day and age that we're getting access to the technology that we can sort of further that research and move along at that interaction level.
Yeah. So when you were studying this, what kind of like methods were you applying?
Because speeding had never been analysed or examined via SAT before, I did quite an exploratory approach for my PhD. So I did survey research, but within that survey research, I also incorporated like a vignette design, you know,
Hmm.
experiment vignettes to sort of tap into, well, if I change, you know, the scenario and the features of that scenario, how do people respond? And I found the actual best study, well, my favorite study in the end of my PhD, and it's strange for me to say because I like to think I definitely prefer quantitative and I'm very much a statsy person, but I did a qualitative study and I found that was just fantastic for drawing out, following that person's story, but applying SAT to that just by talking with them and figuring out what's happening. So I interviewed about 30 odd people and I just got them to talk about their most recent act of speeding. And I
Okay. Yep.
followed their story from A to B, you know, why were you speeding? What was your motivation for speeding? What was happening around you? And by following those stories and applying SAT to it, it I think really highlighted that situational interaction that occurs within SAT, but also the uniqueness of speeding and that it happens from A to B. Because in every one of their stories, you know, even people who didn't like speeding, who caught themselves speeding, I was like, well, what was it in the environment that made you notice you were speeding? What made you stop? Or
Mm.
why were you speeding in the first place? Were you late for work? Or was there some sort of motivation that was pressuring you to speed? And that was, you know, actually my favorite study for my PhD was that qualitative work.
Yeah, that's really cool. And it sounds like you were, so you did the interviews, you're looking at the transcripts, and then you're using SAT as the guide to sort of look for what kind of themes you're trying to draw out of those interviews.
Yeah, so initially, I initially undertook that with the goal of doing thematic analysis.
Mm.
And as I tried to group things into themes, I sort of found I was missing the point of SAT. Because even by grouping themes, I'm sort of creating factors, right? And the
Okay. Yep.
point of SAT is for that interaction. And I sort of had to stop myself. And I thought, well, perhaps a case study approach is more appropriate, more of a narrative journey through, you know,
Mm.
but within the framework of SAT in order to understand it. But yeah, I think it shows that, you know, even research can evolve as you're thinking about doing it.
Oh,
And
yeah, big time.
stopping yourself halfway about perhaps this isn't the best approach, perhaps there's another approach I could be taking here.
Yeah, you got to be like pretty reasonably flexible, right? Like to pursue avenues which show themselves to be fruitful.
Yeah, exactly.
What advice would you give to students who are just sort of starting their pathway into psychology?
I think keeping an open mind is the most important thing I could, you know, pass on to students. I think you go in, most students, I think, definitely go in with, I will become a registered psychologist and I'll work down that pathway, which is a brilliant goal to work towards it if that's what you want to do. But psychology also has a lot of other avenues that you can work in as well. And I think it's being open to that and then taking each experience as it comes. And I think if you find an area that interests you, don't be afraid to, you know, email your lecturer, have a chat to them, talk about, you know, how might this career path play out for me if I were to do research here? Are there any opportunities to partake in the research? And if there are, like the undergraduate research internship that runs every year, you know, take part in that because it's a good experience to get involved in research if that's what you want to do. And even if you do then go on to become, you know, a practicing psychologist, which many of our students will, research will always be a part of their career. Is that real scientist practitioner model. So it's, you know, being able to read the literature, understand the literature to find out what are the best ways that you can help your clients. Um, so I guess it's being open to that research journey the whole way through your undergrad.
Yeah, it's like you do some research, you take part in the URI or you do an honors year where you learn how to do research or whatever. Even if
Mm.
you're not going to become a researcher, like what's worst case scenario is that it just makes you a better practicing psychologist, right? Because you're better able to interact with that evidence base.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, preaching to the choir. All right, that's all. Is there anything you want to add?
uh, no, look, I think that's it. If like I said, and just prior, if anyone's ever interested in learning more about my research or in road safety or situational action theory, feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to have a chat. So
Yeah, you know what? That's an interesting you said that because you talked about reaching out to those researchers at Cambridge about SAT, um, and that seems to have changed the direction of your life course, right?
yeah, well, I don't know, like it's definitely made me I want to say a better researcher only because they've pushed me so hard to sort of catch up to them,
Hmm.
because they're light years, ahead of me, a lot more experience, and I've been very grateful to learn, the different ways that they do research and fall in line with that. So,
I had
and
very
it all
similar
starts with an
experience.
email, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, sending an email off to an academic overseas and
yeah,
him
take
very
a
kindly
chance.
replying and giving me suggestions that sort of changed the trajectory of my career.
The worst thing they can do is say no. So,
I think academics are like really pretty open to getting emails from people. Like it happens all the time.
yeah, we're incredibly nerdy, and all we want to do is talk about our research. So if you,
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sure quite happy.
All right, cool. Thanks for talking to me today, Shay.
No worries, Dan. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to Professionally Psyched. This podcast would not be possible without the ongoing support of our psych community. If you would like to show your support, or if you want us to cover anything on the podcast, reach out via our emails. And don't forget, you can listen to full episodes on Spotify.